This podcast is for educational purposes only and is not a substitute for care by a doctor or other qualified medical professional. This podcast is provided with the understanding that it does not constitute medical or other professional advice or services. If you're looking for help, seek out a qualified medical services provider or other healthcare professional. Welcome to the Live Your Yoga podcast, a podcast dedicated to discovering and sharing all the ways in which yoga can be lived off the mat. Real stories by real people, just like you.
Welcome back to the Live Your Yoga podcast. My name is Salla. I'm a yoga teacher here at Your Yoga Flow, and today we're joined by Anna Brook, my very first yoga teacher, colleague, and friend. I remember my very first yoga class with Anna 12 years ago now, and it felt like coming home. And since that day, I've watched Anna build an amazing career in the well-being arena, but it hasn't come without its challenges, lessons, and breakthroughs. This episode will offer some fascinating insight into where a career in well-being can go when we say yes to the call to take the first step, which sometimes is taking a yoga teacher training. So without further ado, because I know you're all eager to listen into this story, let me give you an insight into what Anna is doing today, 12 years on from when we first met. Anna is a breathwork coach, a women's wellness yoga therapist, and the founder of Shala Women, a women's wellness space in Margate, UK. She has a passion for the power of women's circles, which she holds regularly and is launching a women's circle training in 2025, particularly created for yoga teachers and space holders who would like to deepen their space holding and facilitation skills and experience a range of rituals and practices that they can blend into circles, workshops, and retreats. In her one-to-one sessions with clients, she shares a range of practices: breathwork coaching for trauma release, hypnobirthing, closing the bones. This is ceremony for new mothers, cacao ceremonies, and Thai yoga massage. She holds 10 years experience teaching on retreats, and Shala retreats often involve collaboration with a wide range of holistic practitioners. Her online offerings include the Reset and Rise program, a breathwork and coaching online program for women to help release deep stored tensions and traumas and step into their purpose and power, and of course, to rise. So welcome to the podcast, Anna.
Thank you so much, Emma. Thank you. And it's a real honor to be here with you. And I loved how you explained the first time that we met as a sense of coming home, because that is exactly what teaching yoga for me was at that time and has always been. So it's a real honor to be here. Thank you for offering this.
Oh, I'm so excited to dive right in. And for our listeners that know me as Salla, a little interesting piece of information. For my 30th birthday, I gifted myself a new name. So I was actually born with the name Emma, and Anna knows me as Emma. Anna sometimes calls me Emma. So today we're just going to keep our relationship as it is, as it has always been. But for some of those who pay attention to detail and think, hang on, isn't that Salla? I do have two names. So as we go into that, it's still me. And I really hope you enjoy this episode with us. So we are going to dive right in, Anna. Are you ready?
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
All right. Take us back to where it all began. Tell us about the call you received, which led you to make the decision to train to become a yoga teacher. And can you build a picture for us of where you were in your life and what happened following on from the training in the first 5 years of your new career?
Sure. Thank you. So I discovered yoga when I was at drama school in London when I was about 22. And we had regular practices. You know, it was about getting the body really tuned up at a top level for acting, for the stage, film, etc. An amazing vinyasa teacher, and I actually came away from 2 years at a top London drama school wanting to be a yoga teacher. But it just wasn't quite the career that it is now. You know, people were mainly teaching yoga in village halls, really. Still, there weren't the proliferation of studios that there are now and the opportunities there are with online, etc. So it didn't quite feel like I could go for it at that time. So I thought I'm going to keep this really strong personal practice I've got but I'm going to do the acting, which I did for around 10 years. But I had this very monumental day where I stood next to an actress on a job. It was a really boring, dull acting job. And this woman, she just had a magic about her. And she said to me, I remember it was like a bolt from the blue. She said, do you know what? Next month, I'm going to go and train to be a yoga teacher in India. And I just had that moment of like, everything stopped. The world just stopped. And I went, that's what I got to do. And I said to her, but you can't be an actress and a yoga teacher, can you? And she said, of course you can. You can do whatever you want. And I realized I'd really put myself in a box. You know, I was the actress in London because I'd done my good training and I should stick with that. And she really opened things up for me. And there was just a magic about this woman. Synchronicities would just happen with her. And she was really connected into what I believe I am now 12 years later. But at the time, I'd become a bit disconnected from the magic, from the source, whatever you want to call it. So off I went to India. And, you know, I mean, how amazing is yoga teacher training? I'm sure lots of your listeners have moved through it or are thinking of it. When I was thinking about it, the training I did in India, I saw on their website, someone had said, this is the best present I could ever have given myself. And I thought, wow, that's good enough for me. You know, even if I never teach a single class, how amazing. I'm just going to go and do it. And I had that classic moment walking on the beach in India where I just realized, you know, the tears came and I just realized I just couldn't go back to the life I had lived. You know, everything just shifted. So I got back and I told my acting agent that I wasn't going to go to a top TV audition. I was going to go and teach my yoga class, which is pretty much the one that you came to, Emma, I think. And I think, you know, when we've just trained on the yoga teacher training, I think sometimes, you know, there's that element of us learning our craft, but also that element of being really fired up. You know, I think my practice was so strong at that point. As I'm sure, you know, many of your listeners have found, you know, you're really living it and you're fully immersed in it. And I think that passion really comes across. And I, when I was managing a yoga studio for 5 years, I'd really see that sometimes with new students. They literally come off their yoga teacher training and they were just flying because they were putting so much into their sessions and really thinking about it, not just, you know, rolling out the same old, you know. So that was really exciting. So in that first 5 years, I moved out of London, went down to Brighton, which is, of course, as you know, a super mecca for yoga teachers in the UK. And I just really followed my heart on future trainings. I trained to be a pregnancy yoga teacher. And when I trained in that, I realized that the woman running it, Sally Parks, had this empire of yoga retreats. And that was my goal, was to teach on yoga retreats. And so it came a lot quicker than I'd anticipated, really, because I said, Sally, you know, can I assist you? She said, yeah. And then within a few months, she had me teaching, and then she went on maternity and gave me all her retreats to teach on. So I was doing sort of one a month for a few years, which was an incredible experience of holding space, changing the tempo of sessions, you know, being with guests and going deeper into themes. At the same time, I started to manage a yoga studio as well. They offered me that, my favorite studio in Brighton, Unity. So I learned a lot from behind the scenes as well as a studio manager. I met lots of practitioners and went to lots of sessions, and in Brighton, there are just so many very established teachers. So it was a real immersion. And I think when we've just qualified, you know, just being around people who are a few steps down, further down the journey of it is super inspiring. And also it taught me about the business of yoga, you know, which can feel quite separate, of course, to the teaching at times. You know, I think in this day and age, it's as can be as important in terms of getting ourselves out, you know, to understand the business and the building of our own brand and all of those things are, of course, important. So it was that first 5 years was really exciting. I felt like I learned from a lot of people. And then the next stage was about creating my own offerings more, really.
That's amazing. And I remember coming to you because you were teaching Ashtanga at the class I was coming to. And then you went into teaching a class called Dynamic Yoga, which was sort of a blend of different things. I loved that one so much. And I remember I'd been coming to your Ashtanga class for a little while, and you'd been such an inspiration to me. because you'd said that you were a reasonably new teacher, and you were always so humble about holding the space, as in like, if you made just a verbal cue mistake here or there, you were just so like, oh, just, I'm still getting used to things. And I loved that because I felt really safe, because you weren't trying to be anything other than in the minute, holding the class moment by moment. And I remember bringing some friends along to this class who were kind of some wild, wacky characters. And you were teaching a true Ashtanga class. So you were teaching the headstands, you were teaching the challenging poses with variations. And I remember there was a couple of strong characters in there who wanted to push and wanted to achieve these things. And so you got them up against the wall to make sure they were safe. And the way you held the space for people who, I would say, over pushed, right, on this class. You were warm, you were friendly, you were like, don't worry about it. That was a great try, take a break. And when you're back with your breath, try again. And I just thought, as much as Anna is saying she's a new teacher, she has such a skill for holding space with so many different types of people. And then later I learned that you were in acting. And I wonder if, and it brings me back to later down the line when you told me that someone from On Magazine had been really complimentary about your meditation voice, that it was just, and I remember being with you with that moment where you told me about that. And I was just so delighted for you, because everything you'd done up to the change in career had added so much preparation to your journey. So for our listeners, I almost wish everybody could have been a fly on the wall at Anna's, first classes, because it was evidence of a teacher that is meant to teach. That's how it felt. Yeah, at the time. And I remember when I said, oh, I'm really interested in doing the teacher training. And you shared that lovely phrase that you saw on the website of your teacher training about it being the gift. And you said, and I did it. And it was the best gift. It's the best gift to give yourself. And that has such a powerful offering to be able to like step into our path if we get that call, which it sounded like you really did. You really had this moment where everything was very monotonous for a moment. And you were like, what is this? And then a magic lady walked in and you were like, what is this magic? And then off you go, right?
Yeah, Emma. Yeah. And that's the thing, isn't it, in life, that if yoga has given me one thing, it's just trust that intuition, and you get that moment, isn't it? That we can overlook them, can't we? We can rationalize them and go, oh God, it's going to cost thousands of pounds to go and do yoga teacher training. Oh, but actually sometimes it's so clear, isn't it? It's just a massive whatever it is,
yeah.
And I think that's one of the greatest gifts yoga's given is to listen to our culture often says listen to the head, doesn't it? Listen to the rational. But actually that gut feeling, bolt from the blue stuff, that's definitely what yoga's given me. Listen to that. It's always the head, I think.
Amazing. And I love that it came in a quiet moment where things were monotonous, not that like energetic, so you could really hear it,
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. So let's go on to thinking about 12 years on from you taking that first step. And I've said it already. It's amazing to see what you've created. And I know you are an Aquarius sign, and it really feels like your time is now, because we are in the age of Aquarius, astrologically speaking. And I have watched as you've been elevating your offerings at a pace that is truly inspiring. Every year you are building out from a foundation you set. So today, and we're recording this in the summertime in 2024, what does your career look like, and how are you being pulled to serve your community?
Thank you. Lovely question. So absolutely, the age of Aquarius, we are just in this explosion of holistic practice, aren't we? Which is so exciting, because as I say, 20 years ago, it felt like, coming out of the 70s, it was sort of the hippie yoga teachers and it, it wasn't really accepted so much into mainstream society, I think. And now, my gosh, every town's got a yoga studio. How incredible is that? And women's circles and sound healing and all those things. So I'm just in heaven because there's all these amazing practitioners everywhere. And so I really went from the early days of being more like a yoga teacher for hire. I work for different retreat companies or different studios, to wanting to create my own project. So I ended up moving to Margate, where I'm actually from, back to the roots in the UK. And I thought this is a chance to create my own project. And what's that going to be? Because I've got a studio space here. And really what I realized was that what I thought all these disparate things I trained in, like hypnobirthing, pregnancy yoga, Thai massage, were actually all really linked. And what the link was, and the driving through theme was, is that I'm a woman who's gone from the age of 22 to at that point about 36, and I'm now 42. And I've gone through things in my life, and as I've done that, I've sought different practices to support me during that. Partly for enjoyment and partly for, gosh, this is the hardest stuff I've ever been through. What's going to get me through it? And so I thought I'm going to make a women's wellness space, which encompasses lots of different events and practices, and work more with others, because I'm going to get really specialist in what I do. And then, wow, there's all these amazing practitioners, conscious sexuality, amazing women's coaches down the road. Margate is a real mecca for women's work. And so there's all these great people. So that's really where I went during COVID. We started online. And then now it's much more in-person space that people come to, but also a lot of online offerings as well still. So that's where I'm at really. And the main focus that has come through for me, which kind of has led on from the yoga really, is that I was teaching, the retreats and the classes, and I was just getting to the point where I really wanted to know more about the people in the room. And I was finding that lack of talking on a deep level was something that I wanted to do more of, So I started to go more to women's circles, particularly after the birth of my first child. Not they were necessarily called women's circles, but it was a circle of women, and you got a chance to speak, and that was just invaluable. When I got into motherhood, and all of a sudden you can feel a bit isolated, and everyone else is at work, and you're sort of, with your baby. And so those women's circles were like, oh, thank God, we can all sit and share how we haven't had any sleep and, all those kind of things, and the adjustment to motherhood. And I realized also that in retreats, sometimes I'd say at the end, how have you found the weekend? And people would go around and share. So there was this element of women's circle, but we just weren't calling it that. And then I started to do a bit of training around women's circles and start to call them that and start to hold them more. And as a space to be really heard and listened to, and the medicine of that really. So, and then to move into practices, so we have the women's circle, and then we would try a range of practices and then have more sharing circles. And what I was receiving, a response that we had at Shala, was that people were so needing this. This was particularly after the end of COVID. Women were like, oh my God, thank goodness there's somewhere I can come and actually share what's going on for me, and then do a practice which calms my nervous system or is fun or whatever it is. I get to journal. So really I realized that my passion was going towards women's circles in terms of the group work. But I also trained in breathwork, which is an amazing tool for trauma relief. So breathwork journeying, and that's a whole other big subject I think we may come to. But so it's about deep healing, but also holding bigger spaces, mainly for women. And I just want to caveat that with saying that, I think there's a proliferation of women's wellness spaces, and it's not, I love men, I've got a husband, I've got a little boy, and it's not about not wanting to be inclusive to men, but it's more about this journey that we may move through as women. So through pregnancy, through rites of passage, through the difficult stuff, from a feminine perspective, and also from, the perspective of the seasons of the cycles that we move through. I got very interested in the menstrual cycle, and all of that work that is now coming through with people like Maisie Hill, who happens to live on the next street here in Margate. So that the menstrual cycle and how we need to adjust our practice, because I think what I realized with the yoga practice was that I come in with Ashtanga, which is great. In my early 20s, I was fit, young, strong, and it worked really well. But as I got towards, motherhood, it was like, well, I had to adjust it with pregnancy yoga. I had a child, then it was like, I'm exhausted. I can't do Ashtanga right now, so I found yin yoga. The menstrual cycle, as you're trying to get pregnant, working with the menstrual cycle, it was like, well, it doesn't work to just do vinyasa the whole month. I think I need to be adjusting it much more. So I got very into that charting. So really, in terms of the yoga, it's about adjusting and really tailoring it to what stage of life you're in. I could keep talking for hours, but that's probably pretty much where we are these days.
Yeah. Oh, that's just fascinating. I remember when you first launched the yoga for cycles, or what was the word? It was during lockdown.
Yes.
How did you label that class?
Was it menstrual cycle?
Yeah.
Cycle.
It was yoga classes for the different parts of the cycle, basically, that you were holding. And I remember seeing that for the first time and thinking, I've never seen that before. I've never seen anybody actually being like, hey, here is an option for you. This is what it is. It was so simply written out, the description, I remember. It made complete sense. And of course, at that time, stress in the world was very high. So everybody was hormonally going to be not quite themselves anyway. And I just thought it was true innovation at that time. You just came in and you're like, here's a class for this. And I thought, I have never seen anybody do that before. Now that might just be what I'm exposed to. But for me, that was a real okay, here Anna comes again with something completely revolutionary that we do not see at the traditional studio week on week, right? So for me, that was another point where I thought, oh, Anna's cooking something. She's doing something. So thank you for taking us through those 12 years from taking your first step into the teaching. You talked about breathwork and that it is such a major point of interest for you. And this is something I really have yet to dive into in the way you have. So I'm really interested in what you're going to say here. Take us to the point in your life, if you're comfortable to do so, where this became a real aid in helping you stay on your path alongside being with the events that were unfolding in your life at the time.
Thanks. Yeah. So up to 2017, in my life up to that time, about 10 years or so, all of my yoga practices could support me. If I got stressed, I do my yoga practice. That was mainly Vinyasa, Ashtanga, and then Yin yoga, meditation. I just knew how to balance my nervous system, as I'm sure, many of your listeners do. It's like, that's why we're all here for yoga. It's an incredible way to get ourselves balanced and in a regulated state. So I had a complete curveball come into my life overnight in 2017. And again, something that we all have at times, isn't it? But this was the biggest one I'd ever had. I had a phone call one morning, very early in the morning, to say that my little brother, my only brother, Harry, had been found. He'd had a brain hemorrhage and he's died on the spot, which was the most enormous shock I'd ever received in my life. He was completely healthy, well, everything was going well for him, so it would have been the last person that you'd ever assume would that you get that news around. So straight away, I noticed the body went into shock. The tension within my system was higher than I could possibly fathom. It was absolutely remarkable to be in that state. I'd never been in shock before. And, I'm very thankful to have only had this kind of experience in my late 30s and to have, again, the backup of these holistic practices, because it was very, very powerful. And so, in those coming weeks and months after, as I had a 1.5-year-old child, I was like, right, I really need to start to process this. This is enormous, And the usual practice is just, it was like putting a Band-Aid on a massive wound. They kind of help a little bit, but it was just so deep, and I thought, I'm really going to have to go on a hunt here. But actually, breathwork came to me. My friend Daisy turned up on my doorstep. I just moved to Margate. And she said, look, I've just trained in this technique called breathwork, conscious connected breathwork. Can I give you a session? And I was thinking quietly, it's probably quite similar to the down-regulating, calming breath. I use quite a lot with myself and with clients. But I said, yeah, no, great. Give me a session. And it was so far away from what I was used to. And it absolutely blew my mind. And I thought there and then, I've got to go and train in this with probably her teacher. Because it was like therapy with no words. You're doing a very deep breath over a course of about an hour. So in a breathwork journey, we're moving into these altered states of consciousness. And what I watched was as I did this in about 20, 30 minutes into this technique, I watched my brain start to process parts of my brother's experience of death and my experience of that I hadn't processed in talking therapy. So just very subtle little details of, oh yeah, that had really upset me. And I watched my brain just kind of settle that and process that and integrate that. I was like, wow, this is like talking to the body. You're talking to the body, and the body is integrating and healing itself. It was absolutely extraordinary. And I thought there and then, my God, this is going to be a big part of my life. And it has been since, literally, for 5-6 years now. It's my main practice now that I teach. I trained in it for 2-3 years, and it is extraordinary. And I think in terms of the healing, I mean, really, we're dealing with trauma. On the basis that all of us tend to have an element of trauma, whether it's sort of big T or little t trauma. And often when people come for breathwork, they say, oh, I'm kind of interested. I haven't really got anything in particular. Maybe I feel a bit stressed, or I kind of get a bit angry sometimes, or I don't know quite what it is, to be honest. I just kind of know that I'm not quite myself. And then we start to use the breath in this way, and all sorts of things come through. And I think, in terms of the work with women, that can sometimes be around birth trauma. That's quite a common one. And also, sexual trauma from childhood is quite a common one. And sometimes it's things that it's pre-verbal, so things that people don't actually consciously remember, that can come through, that come through to be processed and integrated. And so the power of it is extraordinary. And as well as the one-to-one space, it can be in a group space. So I developed a breathwork circle where women come together, and we combine the sharing element with this very deep release tool. And it's potent work. And also there's a really, what I've taken from it is often things that I'd read in my yoga teacher training or, yogic theory has come to life. So people who aren't into the spiritual at all say, gosh, in the receiving time there, at the end we do a very deep receiving time, God, I can feel my grandmother. She just sat with me. Or, people start to feel ancestors. I've had people feel like they're lifting out of their body and then coming back in. Certainly the chakras is a very powerful sense of that. I myself had a very powerful practice at one point where it was like the whole energy system of the body just recalibrated. It was like electrical current through the whole system. And then, gosh, did I feel a lot better after my experience with my brother's death after that, So it was just mind-blowing, the finding of that technique for me. And that's why it's now my main, one of my main offerings, really.
Thank you so much for being so eloquent with your language to help us understand this journey. Mm-hmm. And 2, for being so honest about something that was so painful. Mm-hmm. My real wow moment when I was listening to you then was sort of the clarity people are able to find within this experience. They come in, maybe with something obvious going on, maybe not. But each time able to come away clearer on what that was before. Even if, let's say it isn't so clear just yet on session 1, right? They still go away with a feeling of, I'm kind of understanding more of where in my body this is, what it may be speaking to in my life, that sort of thing. And I love that you touched on that. Basically, how I'm understanding what you're saying is culturally, we've moved away from supportive practices for the different seasons of our life. And this practice you offer and the way you've designed it, because of the personal experiences you've had, you are giving people the proper space and time to process their experiences in this life. And as a culture, we seem to not give anybody any time with that. It's almost like hush hush about it. You do it privately in the background. There's a huge practice of practitioners being called forwards. I myself have had that call now in an area that I had no idea I was ever going to go down, but this is happening now. And that's in end of life care. And I was just walking along and then it came in, and I've said this before on the podcast in other episodes, but it's very similar, where it's like the people that can hold this space, we really need more of it for these life experiences that we have. And it's such a big range, isn't it? And even, if I'm thinking about my own body and where I'm holding question marks, it's definitely around the womb space. And I have questions about if that's from generations before, or just simply from the dynamics in my family at the time of growing up. Maybe some message that was received by my womb. I know I've got to do something here, right?
Yeah.
So again, it's not clear for me, but I have an idea of, there's a story there. I don't know if it's mine. It could be a blend. And I get the understanding that this type of work, especially held in such a female energy, a feminine divine energy, is providing so much clarity for people to then really live.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. And the womb space, as you say, it's that what you've just described. I mean, it's like, it's like your subconscious. You know there's something there, but it's like the rational mind isn't quite, it can't quite work out exactly what it is, but don't you? You can feel it in the body. It's like, what is that? What is that feeling? It's like some people feel it as tension or bruising or just this very unique feeling to them, and that's what this very deep breath helps. It's like the breath, the body just talks, the body just talks. And say someone feels something in their womb, sometimes then that sensation moves up to the heart and they go, the reason that, I understand now, the reason that I had that feeling in the womb was because this thing happened in the heart ages ago. I had this thing, and it all kind of comes through. And so the energy moves, the stuckness of whatever that was, which has got stuck, moves. And then either tears come or laughter comes or words come. And that's the release, which can, or shaking sometimes, you may know when animals go through very difficult, stressful experience or traumatic experience, like an antelope gets chased by a lion, they tend to kind of go into the corner once the threat's gone and they shake it out. And as humans, we've lost that ability, or that remembrance that we do that. So that fizzy energy is stuck in our bodies, and then this process, we always do it. I call it a shakeout, but at the start we dance, but in a really free way and bring in all some shaking, and actually for some people, that's the best bit, because actually that release it's so simple, isn't it? It's just dancing, but you're letting out that fizzy energy. Yeah.
I love the language you use with the fizzy energy, because I've actually had that experience. I have that experience myself. And, it can be scary, especially if someone has other medical conditions. So I myself experience epilepsy. And so sometimes I have to tell my body that the fizzy energy, it's safe. It's just processing. I've also had this happen with my clients. I work in a very similar intention to you. I'm not trained in the same way, but I've had many of the same experiences you share. especially with ancestors being there, shaking on the massage table. And I think it can be a scary thought to somebody of, is this safe? It's about how you set it up, I think, isn't it? The education you offer people around that, as to what it is and why. And also, I don't know if you've noticed this in your time practicing, but the practitioner can actually slow that experience down for the client if they get a sense it's been going on a little past where the client is now moving into a state of, more alertness about this. So with the right practitioner, that fizzy energy is very safe. I've noticed.
Yeah, absolutely, Emma. And as you say, if there are other medical conditions, I totally understand where you're coming from around epilepsy and how you feel with that. And so I think with something like breathwork or these trauma release tools, it's really important to work with practitioners who have done a really solid training, who could say, who are going to really ask you the right questions before and say, have you got any medical conditions? Are we, that's why going to breathwork's got quite popular at massive festivals, where you've got hundreds of people doing breathwork, and all that is an amazing energy. There are some of us in the community who feel like, where was the form to check, where the medical conditions are, and we need to be responsible as well, and be careful that we're not practicing things which are, these tools are very, very potent, aren't they? So we need to be careful with
exactly
them, I think.
I love that. So because we've been speaking about this beautiful fizzy energy, how do you understand the chakras differently now? Can you give us a very simple comparison of what life felt like before and then today as a result of these learnings?
Yeah, thanks. So when I came to the chakras on my yoga teacher training, I remember loving them. I love the idea of them, but they felt really theoretical. I was like, this is a model that I want to get on board with. And I love it as a model for themes, through a yoga class and things like that. However, I just haven't felt it. It doesn't feel visceral. It's like the idea of the body as a vessel at that time. I wanted to believe it, but I didn't feel it. And then as time went on and you bring these themes into your yoga classes, and I started to notice actually, say the solar plexus, Manipura, and that sense of self or sense of power. I started to notice when I was doing my strong Ashtanga or Vinyasa practice that actually when that core was strong, I felt more empowered, I felt more assertive, I felt more a sense of my own self. And I was like, that's the chakra, isn't it? You've got that nice and strong. And so you feel all of those things. It was like, that's starting to make sense. Equally, if I felt that my power was knocked or pushed by someone, I feel that as a bruise. And sometimes it can literally feel like a sort of winding, can't it? That's how I experience it anyway. A sort of push into that area. I was like, that's the solar plexus again. So, I think as you learn that framework, you start to notice it more perhaps. And I think, again, with the breath work, what I was noticing was the direct experience of it. So I've had various clients who have had awful throats, so their voice, they're coming all croaky or they've got mouth ulcers. And we go into the breathwork practice, the breathwork journey. And then it comes through that the main issue that they've got going on is that they haven't been able to say to their parents something really important about their end of life care or something. It's trapped things that haven't been said. And it's like, well, of course the body's going to be having that pressure in that area, and how can we balance that, the Shuddha and that area for you? So it's that direct experience, I think. And again, the womb space and the Svadhisthana and, all that we hold there and in the hips, and I think that was another common thing in yoga classes that was sort of said by yoga teachers in the early stages of my career. We hold so much in our hips. And I was like, right. And I found myself saying it, if you're going to pigeon, because we hold lots in our hips. But I hadn't actually felt it, I hadn't actually experienced what I held in my hips. And then actually soon after my brother had passed away, I went to a really strong Ashtanga class. And we've really worked on the Svadhisthana area and the hips, and oh God, all the tears were there. And it's like, so now I believe, now I believe in it because I've experienced it. I've seen the body release in those areas. So now I love the chakras, and these practices where we can really deeply come into them with the breath, for me, are where it's at, so I'm fully on board now.
Yeah, I love that. And I do get a sense a lot of people are, thanks to many holistic practices, really are able, like you said, are able to really feel what that means now, which is a gift to understand more of life, I think. Yeah. I would love to move on to the connection you have to the women of our world, because that for me was so clear when I met you. And then going into the prenatal training that you did, and everything you did after that there was this constant comeback to this community here. So tell us more about this and how your various trainings have influenced your offerings at Shala Women, your studio now.
Thank you. Yeah. So it's funny, isn't it? I think sometimes there are threads in us that are there all along, but we might not recognize them at the time. And I think Shala really is a culmination of something which has been me for forever, really, which is, when I was at university, I actually did a media degree, but it was in Brighton at Sussex. It was a very broad degree. And I ended up writing my dissertation on what the world would have been like if we lived in a matriarchy instead of a patriarchy. So I researched lots of cultures across the world for thousands of years where women had been the dominant forces within their community, or had been respected deeply in their communities. The goddess energies and the fact that we can give birth, and create life and all of those things, and really where we've come to in terms of patriarchy, particularly in the last few hundred years with Christianity and all of those things. So that was all there 20 years ago. And it's like I forgot it for 10 years or so, a little bit with, I was in London, I was in acting, and I was not really connected to nature very much. And then got back down into the hills and living in the hills and was training all the time in these practices. So Shala feels like the culmination of all of that. And so I it's just something in, it's just in the bones. I just feel to draw women together into this idea. I love the idea of the circle. There's just something in me which it just feels right. It just feels right, And I don't know if I've just been in many of them in before I arrived in this body, which is what some people would say, isn't it? But it just feels right and really needed in this world that we're in. And I think there's that deeper themes and underpinning of the world that we're living in, and the patriarchy and the wounded masculine domination, really, of the capitalist forces, is very driving, hungry energy which has been proliferating, and that's that many women that we're in as women as well. I know in my early 20s when I was practicing loads of Ashtanga, I was in that London energy of push, go, ambition, striving, yang. And it was only when I discovered sort of yin yoga and motherhood, I was like, oh, it's something back into the yin. I was like, oh gosh, it doesn't need to be like that. But our society, we grow up in this very driving society, don't we? So yeah. I think it's really, those yin qualities and that the feminine qualities of collaboration and coming together and the slower pace and the connecting with nature rather than ruining it, which is happening so much across the earth, isn't it? And so that it just feels right. And that all of that really underpins, the women's circles and the retreats and the coming together and the healing really of the trauma of everything we've moved through, and something I've been really interested in researching recently for my women's circle training that's coming up soon is around the witch wound, and how not very long ago, our ancestors were moving through this time where, the midwives of our communities, the healers, the herbalists, all of those women who were the cornerstones of our community, it became very unsafe to practice in that way, to collaborate in that way. They were burnt, they were terrible, violent things done towards them, and it became unsafe to trust. Therefore, then we end up with a sister wound and that kind of fear of other women and competition with other women, and recognizing that in ourselves. That's a process that I've certainly been looking into myself with the shadow work. It's the sister wound, a witch wound. Are we just scared to talk about things we really believe in? A few years ago, I would never have said that I was believed in spirit, because how will that be viewed? Whereas now, having moved through my brother's death and had very strong sense of spirit, and extraordinary things, supernatural things happen. It's like, can we be honest about that? And that's the healing of the witch wound, where we're honest. And the thing is, when, as I know you sense, Emma, Salla, it's once you've gone through things like that, you gravitate towards people who also have, and then you realize that so many people are actually not talking about a much deeper experience of life than the materialistic. So many people have had connection to source. So many people have had connection to spirit, ancestors. And probably most of us know someone who's got a ghost story, who isn't a complete, fantasist. They're a normal person who just goes, yeah, I saw a ghost. So, there's all this stuff that we've buried as a culture. Partly to do with Christianity as well. So that's what I'm fascinated in. And I think all of that comes into it,
I just so value your exploration, your commitment to the exploration, because as I hear you talk, I don't hear any judgment. I just hear observation, and I hear personal experience, and I hear the acknowledgement that there are so many experiences shared here. And isn't it so interesting that the typical ghost story, that goes around a little party like anything, right? And no one thinks that's odd. And yet when we want to share a connected experience we've had, people pull back, because all of a sudden that ghost story is a little more real. But I agree. I know so many people who have had either very big experiences or just small, and still have valued that small experience as being an experience they had that was true in their life. So I'm very on theme with you at the moment. I'm in some circles up here in Scotland, and I will arrive in tears sometimes, because I still am not sure it's safe for me to be completely as I am. And I must say, where I live, we have a witch stone, a commemorative stone. What's the word? Like a remembrance stone, because here in Scotland, it went on longer than other places in the world. Sorry, that's not correct. There are still places in the world this is happening, but in Scotland, it went on longer. It was gnarly. It was cruel. And we have one of the sites where this really happened. I live just, it's down the high street. I drive past this stone every day. It's a reminder. Women put flowers there. Everybody puts flowers there. This is not just women. This is human beings showing up for these experiences, saying, gosh, this happened, but we hear you, we feel you. So I myself am someone going through that experience where I also, everything you're saying, it's nice to hear you say it. That's really what it is. So thank you for sharing. And I think a lot of our listeners, wherever they sit in their life experience, whether the connection is through their yoga practice and through meditation, and that's their connection to source, or perhaps they're in a holistic practitioner role where they really are channeling, or other, right? Reiki, what a beautiful practice. It's all the same. It just comes in a slightly different language for all of us. But I do think all of us are receiving. So thank you for bringing it up.
Yeah, thanks, Emma. Yeah, it's so true. It's all different. All these practices, they're all different ways to connect to something really simple, actually, aren't they? In some ways, the deeper part of ourselves, the essence of ourselves, the life force energy, whatever we choose to call it. Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah, that's it. Has a different word for everybody because everybody's truth will be different. But at the end of the day, if we cannot be with each other's truths, we are not really connecting. So thank you for bringing this forward today so that everyone can connect with this again. You mentioned, and I heard that and I thought, oh, how exciting, a women's circle training that's coming up. So I've had the pleasure of working with you over the years in many different ways. And it feels like a circle coming back again, now us having this conversation here. So I've worked with you to establish some parts of the online presence for Shala Women, because many other women were involved in that project, which I love, and also your Breathwork coaching brand. So on that note, because we do have a global audience that can access things online, do you have anything coming up specifically that our community can engage with in this online space?
Thanks. Yeah. So, firstly, Emma, you're amazing as a brand designer. You're epic. And in terms of global online offerings, so the thing that I feel super passionate about is my Reset and Rise program, and this is a one-to-one breathwork. It's a breathwork program, but for a small group. So I was only ever got to around 7 or 8 women within this. It's a 6-week course. I generally do it in January, and we each week move through a coaching topic, but also move through different breathwork practices. Some of them are down regulating and calming, and we always do a breathwork journey every week. And this is really about exploring ourselves in a really super deep way, but also that deep healing potential of the conscious connected breath. And also online breathwork. I work with people from all over in terms of one-to-one breathwork. So I've got a 3-month program, 3 weeks. And then with the Women's Circle training, we're going to start in person. That will be in Margate, but also probably Brighton, Bristol, and then go online probably in 2026.
Beautiful. Thank you. Can I ask a question about your online program? So your 3-month, your 3-week. This is accessible for everybody. So some of the things are women specific, but this one is really open to all. That's correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So the breath work, as I say, Shala is tailored towards women. However, the breath work is super open to everybody. I love working with men, and such a interesting energy which comes, working with men that I really, really love. So yeah, open to everybody.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. And so, as we've just heard, that sounds all very exciting. You can find links to everything Anna is offering in our show notes. And in those show notes, you'll be able to see 2 websites. One is Shala Women, where you'll be able to get a taste and a sense and a visual yummy experience of what that looks like. And then also Anna's Breathwork coaching brand as well, which has its own website too. So head down there, click on the links and discover something new. Let's close this amazing conversation. And I just love the directions it's gone in today. It's been everything that is now, and probably topics that are quite long into the future as well. We like to finish our podcast with one very beautiful and simple question, just to wrap it all up. And that is, how do you live your yoga?
Oh, what a juicy question. I love it. For me, the yamas and niyamas just changed my life. I remember when I went to my yoga teacher training and I sat with those principles on the beach in India after the training, and I weighed up my life next to those principles. And I realized that in certain areas, I was really falling short for myself and for others at that time, 12 years ago. One big one, ahimsa, I always think of ahimsa as kindness to others, which is super important. But equally that sense of kindness to the self, I think I wasn't doing so well at the time. I wasn't, my body needed a bit more extra love, and I was pushing myself super hard. And so it's the subtlety of those principles, which was really changed the game for me. And I think also the ability of these practices to help us to respond instead of react, when we feel the trigger of situations and, we're straight into reaction, and it can give us that space just to be like, okay, how am I going to play this for myself and for others? That's I've just done a work around nonviolent communication. How can I be less violent to myself, to others? And yoga's been amazing for that as well. And I think as a practitioner, just really trusting your intuition and your gut on where you want to train, what lights you up, that bolt from the blue feeling. When you meet a certain teacher and you're like, that person, there's just something about them, go for it, I think.
Oh, what a beautiful answer to a very juicy question. I agree.
We could talk all day, but
I know.
I'll round things there. Thank you so much for having me, and it's been great to talk. Thank you.
Another beautiful episode here with Anna Brook today. Thank you so much for everybody listening in. Please go down and have a look at what Anna is offering. She is always creating something groundbreaking, innovative before its time, but always bang on time. That is something I've noticed. So please do head to the show notes and click on the links to visit Anna and go and say hi on some of her socials as well. You can find the links for Anna there. So we'll wrap this up today with a huge thank you for listening in. And of course, a huge thank you to my first yoga teacher, friend and colleague, Anna Brook. Thank you, Anna.
Thanks, love. Thank you.